Hello and welcome to the Feck It Fun, Fabulous and Free Eating Disorder Recovery podcast. I'm Helly and I'm here to provide regular bursts of information and inspiration, some neuroscience applicable to eating disorder recovery, perhaps a few rants, but otherwise lots of positivity with a bit of a feck it attitude, some fun and a sprinkling of fabulousness to help everyone find freedom in recovery. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Feck It Fun, Fabulous and Free Eating Disorder Elimination podcast. I'm Helly and I'm here talking about eating disorders and my passionate drive to eliminate every last eating disorder out of this world, because eating disorders make lives horrible and they are miserable and isolating. And they disable people and they make people very, very unhappy and unwell, as you very well know, because if you're listening to this, then you probably have an eating disorder yourself or you know somebody who does. So let's believe that we can eliminate eating disorders from your life, from the life of the people you care about, from every last person out there who has an eating disorder at the moment. Because I believe that everybody can recover from an eating disorder. I don't believe that it's a life sentence in the way you might have been told that it is. And I believe that you can recover and you can eliminate the eating disorder from your life, just as other people have from theirs. And you know what the best way to do that is? Well, it comes down to getting some food, trusting that eating that food is the right thing to do because it is, and putting it in your mouth. And then getting some more food and finding the foods that terrify you the most, that piss off your eating disorder the most. And just keep going, just keep eating. And while you do so, decide that you're not going to engage in any means of behaviour to compensate for what you're eating either. You're not going to move about like a mad person. You're not going to exercise. You're not going to purge. You're not going to use laxatives or diet pills or anything else. And you're just going to sit and eat and decide that this is actually okay. And if you decide that this is what I'm doing and this is okay, it might be easier than you ever believed possible. And so today's episode then is about the topic of self-empowerment when it comes to overcoming an eating disorder. So self-empowerment is critical, in my view, to overcome an eating disorder and succeed at building a free life without the eating disorder impacting on your life. But what does that really mean? What does self-empowerment actually mean when it comes to overcoming an eating disorder? Well, self-empowerment involves taking control of the process to overcome the eating disorder and gaining confidence in your abilities to do so, no matter what others around you do, say, or think, or what your brain perceives that others around you might be saying or thinking. And I've written a lot about the importance of self-empowerment in my blogs and my books, but I realised that I haven't actually spoken about it in any specific way on this podcast series. And that's a failure on my part when I spend a lot of time telling people that finding their own empowerment for their recovery to eliminate the eating disorder from their life could just make or break their chances of success. And as I say, in my first book, which is called Addicted to Energy Deficit, and you'll find it on many, many book-selling websites across the world, I wrote an entire chapter on the topic of self-empowerment and how critical it is because of how strongly I feel that it overarches everything for a successful recovery. So this podcast episode is an abridged version of that chapter of the book. If you want to read the entire chapter, then go for it. Get a copy of the book, which, as I say, you can get on many different websites around the world now. And please have a read, learn about empowerment, and really then move forward to become more self-empowered in yourself. But now let's just dive a little deeper into what self-empowerment actually is. So self-empowerment involves developing a mindset in which you believe in your own abilities and you can take charge. You need to develop trust that you can override the eating disorder's urges, stop the behaviours, and eat more. You need to gain belief that you can cope with changes to your body, shape, and weight. Finding the right steps forwards and taking them is key, as is seeking the type of support that will make it easier for you to make the necessary changes. And it's also crucial that as you go through the difficult process of overcoming the eating disorder, you begin to develop a sense of identity beyond it. But self-empowerment is not being told what to do and only doing it because someone else says you should. It's not seeking permission to eat, to rest, or gain weight. It's not blaming others when things don't go as you hoped. It's recognizing that this process is hard and emotionally challenging, and so lapses can be inevitable. And then it's learning from the lapses when they occur, taking responsibility without being self-critical, and carrying on your journey to bash the eating disorder out of your life. True self-empowerment allows you to take control of the eating disorder and problem solve the necessary but challenging steps to overcome it. When you really become self-empowered, you take your control back from the eating disorder. It's liberating, and it can give you a sense of achievement, self-pride, confidence, and self-worth. But why then do so many people with eating disorders often lack skills in self-empowerment? Because a lot of people with eating disorders often lack the factors needed to be self-empowered. And that can be due to having had an eating disorder for years, maybe even decades. It can be because of previously unsuccessful recovery attempts, and for some, prescriptive treatment that has removed their self-trust and independence. And some of you out there have even been told that your ability to ever overcome the eating disorder is minimal at best. When you're told something like that, doesn't that just suck all the hope and most likely all the sense of self-empowerment right out of you? I too lacked any sense of self-empowerment to overcome the eating disorder for years. Despite my inner desperation to recover, after a few short years of having an eating disorder, I was given the prognosis that my poor quality of life was the best I could ever hope for. That left me feeling defeated, submissive, and distrusting of myself. I'd seek the permission of others rather than make decisions for myself about how I could make the necessary changes to find the free future that I craved. And it was only after years of living like that I came to accept that the treatment approach I'd tried over and again was never going to work. I knew I had to find another way forward, and I had to do that on my terms. And it was then that I finally took charge of my recovery for myself. I decided that not only was I going to overcome the eating disorder and prove the doubters wrong, but I was going to do it my way. And it was only then that things ultimately started to change in a more positive way than they ever had before. And the traditional treatment that I cycled through for years, that could make me gain weight. But nothing ever changed at a brain-based level when I was going in and out of those treatment centres. And so the eating disorder and all the addictive behaviours that drove the eating disorder, they just stayed exactly where they were and they never changed. The change only happened when I decided that I was going to break the restrictive eating stop the behaviours and put myself through the emotional processes on a path and on a journey and in a process that I took ownership of. I was determined to do it no matter how tough it got, no matter how much weight I gained or how quickly I gained that weight. Nobody was going to give me a target weight. Nobody was going to tell me that you only gain X amount a week. Nobody was going to make me step on those bloody scales one more time and judge my recovery based on what those numbers said. I knew that I had to stop seeking permission to make changes or looking for excessive reassurance. A professional family member or coach telling me exactly what to eat and when would never work. They could support me when things got tough and help me process my thoughts, emotions, and next steps. But I had to make the changes, take the steps, and do it. This was my life, and I knew I couldn't live with the eating disorder for the rest of my days. I had to find out if my life could be different, and to do that, I had to take back my own control. It was only then that mentally things shifted in ways that they hadn't before. I felt more liberated than I had in years, and finally believed that perhaps I could have a future without an eating disorder. So I believe that self-empowerment involves self-belief, identity, and having a future vision. Because to feel self-empowered means to have trust in yourself. And that's something that a lot of people with eating disorders, perhaps understandably, very often lack. Following repeated, failed attempts to recover, you can lose trust in your own ability to say no to the eating disorder behaviours. If time and again you've been determined that tomorrow I'm going to eat more, but when tomorrow comes you eat all the same restrictive foods, then self-trust in your abilities quickly drops. And the other factor that impacts your trust in yourself is dopamine, and that relates to the urgent and powerful drive to get that energy deficit fix. Pursuing energy deficit creates an instantly calming, soothing effect that makes life feel a bit more possible. And that dopamine release pushes you to pursue more of it and delay the pain for another day. If you want to know more about the pursuit of dopamine and how that drives eating disorders and what you need to do to overcome an eating disorder when it comes to the impact of dopamine on your brain, then I have made podcast episodes about that before, and as always, it's all in the book. Your self-identity will also impact on your sense of empowerment in relation to overcoming the eating disorder. To find the strength and willpower to go through the processes necessary to overcome an eating disorder and resist the frequent and strong urges, you need to believe in a future self who is not someone with an eating disorder. You need to trust that it's going to be worth the pain to get there. Now, when you've lived in a numb eating disorder bubble for any length of time, your identity becomes entwined in it. It's then hard to envision, let alone trust in a future without the eating disorder forming part of your identity. But ultimately, you need to find ways to develop your self-trust and belief in yourself and your ability to change. And it's also important and can be so helpful to create and hold on to a vision of a future that hasn't had the colour drained from it by an eating disorder. When you develop these skills, you're going to feel more empowered and able to take further steps towards overcoming the eating disorder, which will then positively impact your self-identity, your confidence, and your feelings of self-worth. When you can begin to develop trust in yourself, you'll also become more empowered. And that can then drive you to take further steps towards behaviour change. And as you do, you come to trust yourself a little more, and the process continues to evolve. But of course, to take those first steps, you need to have some initial belief in yourself. So tell yourself that just because previous attempts at overcoming the eating disorder haven't worked, it doesn't mean you can't do it now. You are not the same person you were when you attempted to overcome the eating disorder before. You have more knowledge now. You have more insight and perhaps more determination. Think of other hard things you've done in your life and remind yourself that you are a strong person and you can empower yourself to overcome this eating disorder, even when the process is harder than anything you've ever faced in your life. But self-empowerment doesn't mean doing it alone. Taking ownership of the process to overcome an eating disorder doesn't mean you go through it without support or any form of treatment. Eating disorders love people to isolate themselves and thrive in secrecy and isolation. Overcoming an eating disorder in isolation is not the idea here. Please don't go thinking that to be self-empowered you have to cut everybody out of your life and take ownership of everything yourself. That's not what I'm saying. To be self-empowered is the opposite of going through the process alone. If you think about anyone who accomplishes anything big in life, and overcoming an eating disorder is up there with the biggest thing anyone will do in a lifetime, they have a team behind them. Sometimes they have global scale teams behind them. These teams are there to help, support, guide, encourage, problem solve, and improve their overall chances of success, while they remain at the centre of the process, taking responsibility for it. Own your process to overcome the eating disorder and use all the help you can get. Take the driver's seat, but use your team to keep you on track on the journey, to encourage and guide you, to help you overcome obstacles, and to celebrate wins with you. Allow your team to make the process easier in any way they can, while you maintain control of the wheel. Because at the end of the day, self-empowerment is key for reprogramming your brain, and you don't overcome an eating disorder without reprogramming your brain. So as I say, reprogramming your brain is fundamental when it comes to overcoming an eating disorder and the addictive behaviours that go with it. And that involves unwiring the old brain circuits that drive the addictive habits and wiring in new circuits that will drive healthier habits to replace them. And that means that you're using your brain's neuroplasticity, which is much more effective when you're an active participant in the process, making the decision to change, problem solving how, and instigating those changes. When we learn anything new, our brain needs to understand that the new learning is important, and so applying emotions to what you're doing also helps. Dig into your inner motivation, looking to what not having an eating disorder can bring you, and summoning up feelings of excitement and anticipation for your future. And that motivation will also help drive you to keep going when the process gets really tough. Believe in your abilities and celebrate the steps forward. Celebrating the small wins promotes the increased release of dopamine in response to the behaviours that you do want, which can help motivate you to repeat them. And the second component of reprogramming your brain to overcome an eating disorder is that of the dopamine reset. This is when you're going to experience distressing withdrawal effects as you stop engaging in the eating disorder behaviours and experience the dopamine deficit created during the years of engaging in them. Again, that's something I've spoken about in previous episodes. So self-empowerment will help you find ways to tolerate these withdrawal symptoms rather than allowing them to trigger you back into the addictive and numbing behaviours of the eating disorder. So understanding why you feel this way and taking control to recognise the discomfort and yet still choosing to sit through it is empowerment, and that is self-empowerment in itself. And you'll also need to problem solve so that you can identify what support systems will help you when the emotional or physical withdrawal symptoms are intense. You know yourself best when it comes to what support makes a difference and who that should come from. You, more than anyone, know the key triggers that are likely to push you back into the addictive and habitual behaviours. Other people can help you identify these triggers, but no one can tell you what yours are without your input. And choosing to be honest in the process is another thing that only you can do. And that means being honest with yourself and with your support team. And all of these factors that I've just spoken about relate back to being sufficiently empowered and motivated. For brain reprogramming to be as effective as it can be in overcoming an eating disorder, you need to take control of the process, choose to change, build on new behaviours each day while stopping the old ones, and put in place support that will make a difference to you. Believe that you can keep going, even when the withdrawal symptoms are strong and you don't think you can tolerate another moment of them, and develop a self-identity for your future without the eating disorder. Because developing your own sense of self-empowerment and taking ownership of your process is critical. So, people who have overcome eating disorders have been found to say that two things were key to the process: empowerment to do so and something called self-reconciliation. And that means to learn more about themselves and their self-identity. It's possible for you to be supported in developing skills in self-empowerment alongside skills in emotional regulation and self-control. Support and encouragement are also critical when the process of overcoming the eating disorder feels exhausting and distressing. I don't think anybody gets through eating disorder recovery without having emotional support and people there to encourage them and to give that hug when you need it or listen when you need someone to talk to. But meaningful change doesn't happen through a prescription or treatment to a passive patient. Being a patient and being treated to overcome an eating disorder just doesn't work. You need to be active in your process because your future life is at stake. And in my experience, when people are shown what they can and need to do for themselves and then are supported through it, they very often can and will make changes, developing pride in themselves when they do. And that then gives them a stronger sense of self-drive, purpose, and of course, self-empowerment. So you can do this. You can do this. Don't wait to be fixed by someone else, because no one's going to come along and fix you. I'm sorry to say, but that's just the case. Choose to take control of your own recovery, doing it the way you know deep down is best for you, no matter what anyone else says. Decide what process you're going to go through to overcome this eating disorder, how you want to go about it. Don't listen to people on the internet. Don't decide to copy someone on social media. Decide what feels right and true for you to overcome the eating disorder in your case, and own that journey. Go on your own journey. Be autonomous, be independent, and really decide, this is what I'm going to do. Use people to help and support you, and go out there and do it. Beat that eating disorder out of your life in your own unique and wonderful way. Because this is your future, and it's out there for you to grab and take ownership of. So I leave that little message for you to go away and have a think about. Reflect on it. Think about what's going to work for you to overcome the eating disorder in your case. How are you going to make yourself eat more food? How are you going to make yourself push out the restriction in what you eat and when you eat and how much you eat? How are you going to make yourself give up the compensatory behaviours, the constant drive to keep busy, the constant movement and exercise, the purging, the chewing and spitting? How are you going to stop all those things, and how are you going to really do that and gain that trust in your ability to do so? You can beat this and you will beat this. Believe that. I'm Helly. You'll find me on hellybarnes.com, and I will speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Feck-It Fun, Fabulous and Free Eating Disorder Recovery podcast. Don't forget, eating disorder recovery doesn't have to be boring and doesn't have to be serious. Now go and grab yourself some food and have a fabulous rest of the day.